Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm working on a carving in found wood. This is cottonwood bark, and it's a video series that I created on carving Santa. A singular video, I shouldn't say it's a series. It's based off of the Coca-Cola Santa. This was a request, and you can see the full video where I break down my thought process and drawings and how I approach carving the realistic face in regard to Santa, and of course, many other projects there on the website as well. Lots of different project videos there on carving realistic faces, male, female, and the like in wood and cottonwood bark. But this was a kind of fun project because I hadn't done Santa Claus in years. It's been a long, long time. So just kind of looking at how I set up the profile of the face, you can see that it's important that that nose sticks out further than the forehead in almost every case. And leaving some room for the mustache below the nose, made a stop cut below it, and creating some depth around the cheek and defining the mustache and beard, which I find the definition of the mustache and beard to be a great way of kind of setting up for the cheek, and kind of like a nice little anchor point for a lot of the features of the kind of like, cheek and cheekbone, maxillar region. And so you can see again, I've kind of brought the forehead back so that the nose projects, and I'm giving you lots of profile views. One thing I see a lot of carvers doing, as a mistake at least, is they're not looking at the profile of the carving. And that's something I did for years, and my carvings improved drastically when I was able to look at the carving from the side profile. So definitely recommended that if you're carving a face, you find a profile picture, or just a side view, in other words, of the person that you're carving, or just any person. If you're carving a wood spirit, or just kind of wood spirit, mind you, is just a kind of a whimsical man with long flowing hair, kind of typical in the wood carving world. But yeah, finding some reference photos that you can see. There's a front view, but then I also have that side view to reference. And I did my little alcohol ink sketch, and helpful too if you're inclined artistically to draw out the carving beforehand. I rarely do this, and I did this because I didn't feel totally confident with my own interpretation of that. Well, I just didn't know if I would get it right, So important to do a drawing if you're kind of hesitant or haven't done it before. I can't remember the name of the sculptor, but he said, it's a medieval sculptor, would say that the key to sculpture can be summed up in one word, and that is to draw. So drawing is super helpful. Very good. Drawing good. So the knife work that you're seeing here is to sort of get the planes of the forehead. And yeah, I kind of talk about that here at this point, where I divide the forehead into kind of three planes, and actually the frontalis and how it changes the shape and the natural kind of curve and angularity of the forehead. Kind of there's a lot going on up there, so it's not just a round area. You see a lot of people kind of just making a round kind of dome up top, and it's usually not the case for most people. And so, yep, going around with the knife to define the nostril flares, coming in the inside corners with my 4mm number 9, inside corners of the eyes, that is. And then bringing that bridge back, I really want him to have that kind of upturned nose, which you commonly see in females, that kind of upturned nose, meaning if you look at the profile from the base of the bridge to the tip of the nose, it's a kind of uphill scoop. That's very common in female faces and less common in male, but for whatever reason, maybe it's that Northern European thing, the Santa has a upturned nose and a very prominent kind of squarish forehead. So just getting the finer details of the forehead. I'm sketching the eyebrows in. I kind of like to sketch the eyebrows in because for whatever reason, it's super easy to make mistakes with the eyebrows being uneven. And so I like to at least kind of roughly sketch them in so I know which direction I'm headed in. And similar benefit to sketching on paper before you start carving. And yeah, so this was my first and only recent attempt at carving Santa, and I'm happy with it. It turned out pretty well. I can't complain. I did actually end up selling this carving at an art show shortly after this was made. So thanks to the individual who bought it. I can't remember who they are, but appreciate that. And so now I've kind of defined the mound of the eye and gone along with a V-tool to create the upper eyelid. So I'll start with the upper eyelid, go with the lower. And because he's smiling, his eyes look even squintier than normal. But on the whole, most folks make the mistake of opening up the eyes too much. And so when I'm drawing the lower eyelid, folks usually look at me like I'm crazy. But it's usually not as far spaced as far as the average person would think, right? So if you look at your own eye in the mirror, the mound of your mouth, mound of your eye rather, looking at the mouth, it's throwing me off. The amount of your eye is pretty big in comparison to the opening of your eye. So yeah, and speaking of mouth, I am carving a hole under the mustache, and I've got it considerably lower than it would normally be because his mouth is open. So his lower lip is going to kind of hang a little bit lower than it might otherwise had he just been stoic or smiling or grinning, but he's kind of got an open grin or open mouth. He's a happy camper. Then I'm going in defining a little curlicue, the classic Coca-Cola Santa curlicue, with the hat, his fur cap, defining that. Well, really just rounding it up a little bit. It's already kind of been blocked in. And so that little warning was for the full video. Apparently there was an issue with audio for just a moment, so we were able to resolve that, thankfully. Just something with the microphone, it kind of turned around, so it was muffled. Anyway, so I'm cleaning up around the hat and kind of creating some separation between the hat and his head, because while the hat is sitting on his head, it's not a part of his head, so we want to make sure that that you're doing a nice, what we call a stop and relief cut or a parting cut. Start with a V-tool and then go over it with a knife. And then I'm doing hair, or fur, I guess technically, but I treat it kind of a similar way that I would treat hair, in that I start with a big gouge and I get the major shapes. And then I use a smaller gouge, subsequently smaller gouges, to refine the tufts and those groupings of hairs. Yeah, and so I'm just cleaning everything up using kind of more V-tools and more of my knife to kind of sharpen things. Here you can see I'm going right to that V-tool to kind of give the fur a soft kind of look, and tighter groupings. Tighter and smaller groupings, whereas with a beard and mustache, I'll kind of create a little bit more continuous strokes to indicate that it's less kind of fluffy fur and more of a kind of long, wiry hair. And so kind of the difference between carving the hair and the fur of his cap. You don't want those to be too similar. A mistake you could make is to make the fur of his cap look almost identical to his mustache and beard. So we didn't want that to happen. So we use a little bit different of technique. Similar tools, but different technique. So you can see here, hair as it moves away from the face tends to part or separate. And so I'm creating big gaps in between the hairs at the bottom of the carving and toward the outside of the beard as it moves away from the face. So that's what you're seeing here. And I'm going in, kind of rounding the forehead a little bit, shrinking things up, creating the tuft of hair, little curlicue. Kind of getting the movement there, carving the wrinkles. Now the smile lines and the forehead lines. And I'm careful to kind of sand them out. I don't want them to look too harsh or hard. I do use sandpaper. I know that's kind of sacrilegious. And in my instructional videos on fundamentals of wood carving, which is linked below, I do encourage the use of sandpaper. It's not necessary. I'm not a super strict carver in that sense where I don't use anything other than a wedge and edge. I think might as well use the tools to your advantage. I will say though, I do a lot less power carving, and in the school I teach mostly hand carving, which is so much more enjoyable and relaxing. It's just like night and day. So love to hand carve. Produces less dust. It's less noisy. It's relaxing. It's almost meditative. So if you haven't tried, carving is such a meditative, relaxing, and rewarding hobby because at the end of it, you actually have something to show for your work. And something about having a three-dimensional sculpture, there's satisfaction from that I haven't personally gotten in other mediums of art, drawing, painting. But I digress. I'm just carving the mound of the eyebrows. You can kind of see I removed a bit of the forehead to get the eyebrows to stand away. And then I go in with my veiner and I detail the eyebrows with that veiner, create the flow of hair. So that is pretty much it in terms of major carving. Maybe I'll do a little adjustment, but I'm sanding a lot here. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys. Appreciate it.